will start with some initial cross section, or you can say assumed cross section, and based on this you perform initial analysis. That would mean, in case of a beam, that would mean MU. Now based on this MU, you will design. So in this design process, one of the outputs of this design will be cross-sectional dimension. So you will have updated, once you have updated cross-section, now this updated cross-section may differ from this initial cross-section. So based on this, you will incorporate this updated cross-section, and once you update the cross-section, the self-weight of the beam will be updated, and that means the MU will be updated. So this MU, which dictated this design, is now a different value, and based on this reanalysis, you will redesign. Usually 1 or 2 cycles are enough to converge this process. So this is how this analysis and design cycle will interact with each other. Result of analysis to be used as input for design, and the output of design will become again input for analysis, and that analysis when performed again becomes input. So this is how this process will continue. The reason I'm discussing this over here is to give you an understanding of how to practically design. What I mean by that is, in order to design, you need to first be able to calculate MU. So our first topic, today's topic, is in fact not about design, it is about calculating MU, how to calculate MU at a different location for a beam. So this is article 5.2, analysis of continuous one-way floor systems. If you have to design a simply supported beam, then the analysis is pretty simple. But that's not the common case. When you're designing a beam, often it's a continuous beam. So you need to understand how to analyze a continuous beam. And for that, you need to recall the concept of influence line diagram, ILD. You see, these are the columns, 4 columns, and the slab is continuous on this side as well as on this side. On all 4 sides, it is continuous. On these columns are resting these girders, these 2 girders, and perpendicular to them are running these floor beam. This is a floor beam, this is another floor beam, this is another floor beam, and so on. A girder is usually a heavier beam which always rests on columns. It transfers its load always to the column. So property number 1 for a girder is must be transferring its load directly to the columns. This girder does an additional job. It also acts as support for the floor beams. And the third and the obvious property is heavier or equal to a floor beam. The beam which is being supported by the girder is a floor beam. A girder is something that must transfer its load to the column. For floor beam, we have 2 possible cases. A floor beam may transfer its load directly to the column or may be resting on a girder. For example, in this case, look, this is a girder transferring its load directly to the column, transferring its load directly to the column. These 2 are girders, and perpendicular to them we have floor beams. This floor beam is resting directly on columns, transferring its load directly on column. Same goes for this one. But the other one, this one is resting not on the columns, it's transferring its load to these 2 girders. Such a floor beam which transfers its load to the girders and not to the columns is called intermediate floor beam. So you see this word over here, intermediate floor beam. This is how it looks like in 3D. This is a column. This is the heavier beam is the girder resting directly on column. This is a floor beam. This is also a floor beam. This is also a floor beam. This beam, this floor beam, which is the edge beam, is also called spandrel beam.